Last year, I visited the best barbecue joints in Kansas City to try their famous Kansas City-style burnt ends, and I even had a chance to cook KC-style burnt ends at the American Royal World Championship of Barbecue. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to make authentic Kansas City-style burnt ends, so let's get smoking. I like to take a scientific approach to barbecue, and I'm always A/B testing different methods of cooking. And this video is going to be no different. With the first method that I'm testing, which I'll call the traditional method, I'm going to take the point muscle of the brisket up to around 205 to 208 degrees Fahrenheit until it's super tender. Most of the collagen has rendered into gelatin and the burnt ends are super squishy. Then I'm going to sauce them and set the sauce and see how they turn out. And with the second method that I'm going to compare it to, I'm going to take the point up to around 195 degrees internal, and I'm going to use my long hold method, which is 18 hours at 150 degrees Fahrenheit held overnight, and we'll see if that turns out any better. But the first step is to trim and season the brisket, so let's get to that. What I need to do now is remove the point entirely from the flat. Normally what I'd do is I'd cook the brisket whole, and I'd cook it Texas style, and then I'd trim off the sides of the point, and those would be my burnt ends. So not very many burnt ends because we're only using 2 thin slices of the point for burnt ends. But with Kansas City style burnt ends, what we're doing is we're cooking the point whole and we're making the entire point into burnt ends. So we're gonna have a lot of burnt ends. So let's start by opening up this brisket. I like to just slice the cryovac like this. Slicey, slicey, slicey. And then I give it kind of a perpendicular cut like that. And now I can remove it from the cryovac, while hopefully keeping all the juices inside. Okay, so starting with the point, separating the point from the flat, I just look for where the seam starts, and then I'll make a cut and try to separate it as efficiently as possible. I just like cutting around here. And then really with any butchering, whether it's with deer that I harvest during hunting season, or with sides of beef that I buy, or with pork or chicken, any type of butchering you do, it always involves separating the muscle group a little bit and then pulling back on one muscle group while you slice and cut the connective fibers between the muscle groups, and the muscle groups should just slide apart if you do that. We're cutting through the fat a little bit here. Slice, slice, slice. You can see how these little connective fibers here, they're just easily pulling apart with just a light stroke of my knife. And I am completely through. So now we have a separated point and flat, and we did that in like 30 seconds. Now for the top of the point, I'm just trimming down the flap a little bit here, just to get rid of those edges. I'm gonna remove some of this thick fat on this side. I'm not being super careful because I know there's a lot of fat on this. We want to get it down to maybe 1/4 inch thickness. Now we have this kind of thin piece over here, so I'm just going to square this up because these are going to be really thin burnt ends if we keep that entire piece. Slice it down this side. See what we're working with here. That right there, those are gonna make beautiful burnt ends. That's exactly what we're looking for. And you see that there's a little bit of a thinner side right there, but we're gonna leave that on anyway. And just finishing off at the bottom here, there's a little bit of hard seam fat left, so I'm gonna carve that off. And this is like a lower choice grade brisket, guys. I'm not using prime or Wagyu or anything. This is just real life. You're picking up a cheap brisket at the store and you're making burnt ends. I'm not trying to show anything special here or hide anything. The way that I'm gonna cook this is going to result in a juicy product regardless of the grade of brisket that you buy. All right, I've got my 2 points here. I'm gonna season them now. You can see that there's a little bit of intramuscular marbling, some collagen. The connective fibers are pretty thick here in the point. The way that I usually season any of my brisket is I'll start off with some soy sauce or seasoning sauce, and I'll just slather it all over the brisket. Give it a little bit of a shiatsu massage. There we go. Make them feel good. And then coat this other point. Now I'm gonna hit it with my Smoke Trails BBQ brisket rub, available on Amazon, really good. We will give that a coating, pretty thick coating, because I want to build up a lot of flavor on this, a lot of bark. Now these aren't Texas style burnt ends, so I don't want to make them super savory. I want to make them a little bit sweeter because we're doing Kansas City style burnt ends, and that is just the cuisine. That's the way that they do it over in KC. So I'm going to use some Let's Go general purpose rub, and this stuff is a lot sweeter than my brisket rub. Goes great for Kansas City style barbecue, goes great on pork, ribs, Anytime you are trying to amp up the flavor of any barbecue, or even popcorn or vegetables, goes great on anything. All right, we'll flip this over and we will rinse and repeat on the other side of the points. And now we're gonna let these sweat out on the counter while I go light up the pit. After the points are seasoned, I'm lighting up my Oklahoma Joe's Longhorn offset smoker with some charcoal and wood splits, maintaining temps at 250 degrees. Both points now go on the smoker with the thicker side facing the firebox. At 140 internal, the points are looking really sweaty and they're stalling quite a bit, so I bumped temperatures up to 300 degrees Fahrenheit to speed things up at this point. No pun intended. 5 hours later, these points are now 170 degrees internal, so I'm foil boating one of them and I'm fully wrapping the other one. You can use foil all around, but these points are small, so I'm just putting the one in a pan and covering it, which is much easier. 8 hours in and the wrapped point is around 208 degrees internal and probing tender, so I'm removing it and letting it rest on the counter for around an hour or two. Another 2 hours later, around 10 hours in total into the cook, the foil boated point is probing around 195 to 200 degrees internal, so I'm wrapping it with some ghee and putting it in my holding oven at 150 for 18 hours until the next day. The traditional point has been rested down, so that night I quickly sliced it into some cubes to test it out for just texture and taste. Pretty delicious, but we'll see how it compares to the long hold burnt ends tomorrow. The next day I'm slicing the long hold point into cubes and testing for taste and tenderness. They turned out a lot juicier than the traditional method, so I think this method is the winner for me so far. Now I'm putting the burnt ends in a pan and saucing them with some Meat Mitch Womp sauce. Meat Mitch is an excellent barbecue joint in Kansas City / Overland Park, and they made the best burnt ends I had during my visit, so I picked up a few gallons of their sauce. I'm also sprinkling on a little bit of extra Let's Go over the burnt ends for a little bit extra flavor, and I reheated the traditional point that I cooked last night and cubed it and sauced it for another comparison. Now the pans go on the smoker at 300 degrees to set the sauce for around 30 minutes to an hour so it can get tacked up. All right, guys, we have the long hold burnt ends on this side and we have the traditional burnt ends on this side. So I'm gonna try the traditional burnt end first. So I'll get a really juicy one. Look at that. That looks really, really nice. If I can just squish that. Woo. See how it tastes. Amazing. I have nothing bad to say about that. So I'm really interested to see if these are going to taste any better. Let's see. So we'll give that a squish. It's about the same. Really good and just a little bit more juicy than the traditional ones. This just seems a little bit more luxurious. It has a little bit more collagen rendering. So long hold for the win, again, in my opinion, but it really depends. If you want to cook everything on the same day, I think the traditional method is just fine. For a cut of meat that is so fatty and has so much intramuscular collagen, it's not really a big deal to take it up to a high temperature, but the long hold makes it just a little bit more juicy, and I like it because it's a little bit more convenient for me because I can split up the 2 days into more manageable chunks. It's a shorter smoke time on Saturday for me, and then it's a shorter smoke time on Sunday just for saucing and setting the sauce. But the traditional method turns out a great result if you want to cook everything on the same day. Thanks for watching, guys. If you have any ideas for future experiments you want to see on the channel, let me know in the comment section below. And until next time, happy smoking.